I want to start this video by saying that I'm not 100% sure how I feel about all of the details of what I'm going to cover today, because if we're all honest with each other, there's certain things that you think that are accepted by modern culture. There's certain things that you hold on to that are from previous cultural norms, and it's hard to kind of work through those things in a permanent way that's universal. There's almost always conditions and cases and things like that whereas you would apply a certain viewpoint to one thing, it doesn't necessarily apply properly to other things. The impetus for this video is this visceral feeling I have that Ann Coulter is a racist, and kind of an unabashed one. I'm sure she would disagree if you asked her the question, but just you listen to what she says, and it sounds like racism to me. But then on the other hand, this is where I say there's never absolutes in anything. Some of the arguments that she makes when it comes to thinking about the way that she thinks makes sense if you accept a couple of things. As a person who was born in the 1980s and grew up in the 1990s, lived through 9/11, lived through the 2000s and all the craziness that we went through with all of that, served as a Marine during that period of time, was raised on modern ideas that skin color doesn't matter and, we should be accepting of people and all of those things. And even with all of that, I still lean very conservative on a lot of things. I believe in America. I believe in America first. I believe that our citizens matter more than any other citizens. I think all of those things. But I also am a product of the public school system from the 1980s and 1990s, and you are indoctrinated into a certain number of things that are, some of which are absolutely correct, some of which are kind of, I don't know. Her contention that it's a bad thing that the United States has significantly reduced the majority of white people who live here compared to the rest of the ethnicities that live in this country is a bad way of thinking as far as I'm concerned. But I have to say that the source from which she is drawing that conclusion tends to be correct. She, whether she realizes it or not, is using white people as a stand-in for the culture of people who came from Europe and did what they did to establish this country. Now, unfortunately, all of those people were white people. And that's, in our racially charged, racial-centric viewpoint of the way we look at things right now, anybody who even kind of sort of adjacently addresses that is going to be labeled a racist. Anytime you bring up skin color in the slightest, you are opening yourself up in a legitimate way to being called a racist. Me even speaking the words right now are going to have some people so triggered that they're just going to hear racist. That's fine. It is what it is. I disagree with the idea that skin color matters in the slightest. It just doesn't. Who you are as a person is what matters, and the culture that you grew up in matters. Her contention that the dilution of white people in this country by masses of immigrants coming from third world countries and changing the dynamic of the way that our citizenry is in this country is absolutely correct. It's unfortunate that the tendency of all of that tends to be non-white people coming into the country, and that creates a certain amount of racism among people who think the way that she does. She did kind of a half-ass way of trying to clarify that, she believes in the idea that she's trying to make it seem like it's not necessarily skin color and it's the culture. The British people came over here and settled this country. Like, I kind of agree with her point that we are not necessarily a nation of immigrants. I kind of agree with that. We are a nation of invaders, yes, we came over here. There were natives who lived here. We did push them out of their territory. We did establish a nation. We were settlers. Those of us of European descent whose families came here early on. We were settlers more than we were immigrants. Immigration implies that you're moving to a place that's already established. Settling means you're building something from scratch. Now that settler tab, that settler moniker, assumes that there's nobody there. So we as Americans necessarily have to live with the fact that, yes, we are settlers, but we were also invaders. And we did come in and push out people who lived here. You can decide for yourself how right or wrong any of that was. You can look at the situation from many different perspectives and come up with many different thought processes on it. On the one hand, yes, it's wrong to use force against people and steal from them. Yes, absolutely, 100% true. But then on the other hand, we wouldn't have the country that we have today if that hadn't happened. If the Europeans hadn't come over here, if the entrepreneurial people hadn't come over here to try to settle, we wouldn't have iPhones and cars and all of these things, because the culture of the Native Americans who lived here was one where they didn't care about progress in technology or any of that kind of stuff. They were content to live with the land as it was. And there's always going to be a large portion of the human population who agrees with that and thinks it's a crime that was stopped. But then you also have the rest of us who live in this modern era and are grateful for the fact that we live in a country where technology has made life way better than it ever could be under the original way that the Native Americans were living. Does that justify invading people? No. But just like everything in the world, there are consequences to the things that happen, and not all of them are always evil. The idea that immigration is something that we should not have any kind of control over as a country does strike me as naive and dangerous. Not because you should approach that idea from a standpoint of racism. If your basis for not wanting people to come into your country is because they look a certain way, that's kind of bullshit. But I agree with the premise that if you want to come into America, then you need to become an American. It means you need to leave your culture behind, or at the very least sublimate your culture in favor of the new American one that you are adopting. If you want to come into our country, you need to assimilate. She said assimilate is now a bad word. I don't understand why. If I go to Uganda, I don't expect the Ugandans to just let me be an American and that's it. Like, no, I have to become Ugandan if I want to be a citizen there, if I want to live there, if I want to take part in their politics, if I want to take part in their decision-making processes. I need to adopt the way that Ugandans view their society, and then that's what needs to happen, right? That's how immigration is supposed to work. It's not supposed to be you move to another country, but you still get to be wherever you came from. Like, that's your roots, yes, and you can always honor that, but you must be acting on a daily basis and agreeing with and thinking in the same way. You actually do need to change the way you think to put yourself in line with the society that you're joining. It's very difficult to disagree with anybody who says that we have a lot of people around the world who are only coming to America because we have made ourselves the bitches of the world. I mean, how many... if you don't think that a lot of people are coming here just because they get something for free from us, you're being naive. You're being extremely naive. It's hard to talk about things like this because people are so incredibly emotionally invested in this particular subject. Just like abortion and religion and all of these other things, there are people who believe that helping people is the paramount thing that needs to be done, and they don't consider the consequences of what that might mean. It does nobody any good if helping somebody else requires the sacrifice of another person. If that person wants to voluntarily sacrifice their own life to save another person, that's one thing. For the rest of us to decide, no, you know what, we're going to save this so that we can get, so we're going to sacrifice this so we can save this. And the people who are actually having to make the sacrifice don't get a say in the process. Like that's what this whole immigration thing really is. We cannot support having every needy person in the world coming here to America and using our system to benefit themselves. We cannot afford to have every person in the world who wants to come and find a better life for themselves to not only come here and use our system, but also hold on to their own culture that they came from, with no expectation that, you know what, this is what it means to be an American, and if you want to live here, then you need to conform to that. While I think that Ann Coulter tends to have a far more racist viewpoint than I'm comfortable with, just from the way she says things, I feel it's more racism than it is what it is that I'm trying to delineate here, which is culture. While I think that that's a horrible thing in the way that she seems to be thinking about it based off of what she says, I agree with the idea that the reason why we have separate countries is because we all have different ideas about how the world should work. And the way that you make that work is that you have one group of people who form a country who think in a certain way, and then you have another group of people who form their own country, and they think the way that they think about things, and another and another and another, and people stay where the country that they live in makes sense to them. That's the way that, like, I know that's not how it actually works in the real world, but in an ideal kind of situation, that's how it would work. You live in a country. And then here in the United States, you live in a state where you can live with the thought processes that are there. You go where the people think and behave the same way that you do, or at least in a way that you find acceptable. The idea that America being the land of opportunity justifies giving every person in the world immediate and instant access to everything that we have here is ludicrous if your additional thought process on that is not, they also need to conform to the way that we do things here. You do not get to come here to America and bring Sharia law with you, because we don't believe in that here. We believe in a fundamentally different system. You do not get to come over here and bring whatever laws that have to do with, Hinduism, and decide that you're just going to implement that in your community, and that's just the way that it's going to be. No, we believe in freedom here. We believe in individual rights. You do not get to implement Christian things. There's a lot. I have to say, I'm very troubled by a lot of the Christian religious things that are being pushed into government-related things. Like, that's not American, right? I agree with the idea that our country was founded by Christians and that they implemented a lot of Christian ideology into our legislative thought processes. Our nation is absolutely shaped and sculpted by Christianity. There's no denying that. But the Founding Fathers also went out of their way to make sure that it wasn't the law of the land, that the separation of church and state is something that is fundamental to the way our government is set up, because they don't want tyrannies they don't want a tyranny, right? And Christianity has been used many times throughout history to implement tyranny on the people. I know that this video has kind of waffled around and meandered a little bit because, like I said at the beginning, there is a certain amount of chaos going on when it comes to all of these various topics that have to do with people coming here into this country and living the kind of lives that they want to live. And while, for the most part, I think that we as Americans believe that you should be able to live whatever life that you want, we also believe that we have a certain set of principles that we have established our nation on, and if you can't live within those boundaries and still be who you want to be, then you don't need to be here. You need to go back to where you can live and behave and do the things that you want to do. The problem in the rest of the world is that there are too many people out there who do not agree with the idea that the individual has the right to live the way that they want to, and they want to force their viewpoints onto everybody else. And we here in the United States tend to have a really big problem with that, But the more and more we bring in people who disagree with the founding principles of our country, the more our country is going to start to look like the rest of the world and the fewer freedoms that we're going to have. And that's just the way that it works. And that's an uncomfortable thing to talk about because it makes you sound like a bad person when you say that. It makes you sound at first glance that you're being racist or exclusionary or any of these other words. But countries exist for a reason, and they exist for a very good reason. They exist because it allows a group of people to band together to build something in a shared vision of what we all agree is the right thing. And while, yeah, that tends to get corrupted by a lot of different things, in general, America overall is still a country of citizens who believe in the idea that individual liberty is important, that you should be free to be who you want, follow your dreams however you want, so long as you're not hurting anybody else. Like, these are the things we agree with. And it's unfortunate that for a very long time, we've been bringing in a lot of people who just refuse to conform to that idea. And what do you do? And what do you do after that? All that's happened? Like, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. This video is not necessarily here to lecture anybody. Not this one. I know I lecture a lot. I know I come with firm, hard viewpoints. But the only solid things I can say about this is that it is not wrong to... It is wrong to look at somebody's skin color and make a judgment about them. It is not wrong if you live in a country and other people are coming into your country and trying to change your country because they want to make their culture the primary thing. And if we as American citizens are so accepting of everybody else that we can't see the danger of that, then we have a problem. Because one day you're going to go out your front door and there's going to be people out there in uniforms you don't recognize, and they're going to be forcing you to do things because now they're in control. I know that sounds insane, but it can happen pretty quick. It can happen pretty quick. So that's all I wanted to say. Just keep it in the back of your mind. Culture is different from race, and cultures do matter. This whole multiculturalism thing cannot work. We all have to have a shared vision for what our country is and what it should be doing. And the moment you start saying every other cultural ideology is equal in our system, then you start to have some issues. So hit the like button, subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers, and I'll see you for the next one.